Welcome to This Explainer. Let's jump right in, because today we're unpacking a massive reporting gap in modern journalism. We're looking at why the mainstream media literally bombards us with streaming stock tickers 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, but somehow remains completely blind to the massive, slow-moving environmental trends that are actively dictating the future of our planet. The source material asks us to reflect on this absurd disparity. Think about it. Why is it that you can true on almost any cable news program and instantly find a streaming ticker tracking every single micro fluctuation of the S&P 500 or the Dow? We track daily market dips with laser precision. Yet, when it comes to the physical assets that make our entire economy possible in the first place, the actual health of our planet, the media is just completely silent. Okay, let's dive into this. The sources highlight a glaring double standard in how these two areas are covered. Financial news meticulously tracks the underlying trends, but environmental news? Well, they only show up to report the reactive event. The media will absolutely rush to cover the crisis of a raging wildfire or a devastating flood, but they consistently fail to report on the underlying systemic trends and environmental impacts that caused those disasters to happen to begin with. Section 1. The Unreported Trends. Tech Giants and E-Waste. To truly understand what's going unreported on a daily basis, we need to look first at global e-waste. This is a staggering issue happening right under our noses, driven by the tech we literally use every single day. Environmental watchdogs have flagged the top 5 corporate culprits driving this impact: Apple, Samsung, Amazon, Microsoft, and HP. And the reasons cited in watchdog report cards are pretty rough. We're talking about gluing in batteries to make home repairs nearly impossible, incredibly short software update windows that basically force you to retire your hardware, and in some cases, outright destroying millions of unsold or returned electronic items just to clear up warehouse space. No joke. So what is the structural driver behind all of this waste? It's a design philosophy known as planned obsolescence. Basically, this is when consumer electronics are designed with a deliberately short lifespan to force you into frequent replacements. Amazon's vast output of low-cost, short lifecycle smart gear is a prime example. Or take HP, who uses dynamic security firmware updates to literally block third-party or refilled ink cartridges. It drives unnecessary plastic and microchip waste just to force consumers to buy their specific brand over and over again. And this brilliantly illustrates how a single software policy can have massive physical consequences. Microsoft's hardware requirements for Windows 11, specifically the mandatory TPM 2.0 chips, officially rendered hundreds of millions of perfectly functional PCs entirely incapable of upgrading from Windows 10. Environmental groups are warning that this one corporate decision risks creating an unprecedented, absolute mountain of premature PC e-waste worldwide. Section 2. The global dumping ground. But zooming out to the international stage, where does all this discarded hardware actually go? E-waste isn't just about manufacturer design. It's heavily fueled by illegal exporting and informal dumping. When analysts look at the top e-waste generating countries by total gross volume, the numbers are absolutely staggering. China leads the pack with 12 million tons, driven by the world's largest population of gadget consumers. The US follows with 7 million tons, fueled by high purchasing power and super low national repair rates. And India generates 3.2 million tons due to a rapidly expanding middle class adopting personal electronics. It's these massive consumer bases, combined with incredibly short device upgrade cycles, that are driving these insane volumes. Now, take 27 kilograms. Let that number just sit for a moment to build some gravity. That is the staggering amount of e-waste generated per person per year in Norway alone. It sets up a stark juxtaposition when we contrast total sheer volume with per capita generation. While countries like China and the US produce the most overall weight by far, wealthy Western nations like Norway, the UK, and Switzerland generate the most individual per capita waste. And a huge portion of this discarded hardware from wealthy nations is historically exported, often illegally, to developing nations in West Africa and Asia. It ends up in unregulated scrap hubs like Agbogbloshie in Ghana, where workers literally burn electronics to extract heavy metals, causing severe, devastating toxic exposure. Section 3. The real planetary crises. Now, despite the horrifying scale of the global e-waste problem we just covered, here is a shocking pivot. According to the data, e-waste doesn't even crack the top 5 overall environmental issues facing our planet today. These are the actual macro crises identified by the UN, the World Economic Forum, and Earth.org. Climate change acceleration,
biodiversity loss and ecosystem collapse, widespread pollution, water scarcity threatening global food production, and massive deforestation in critical carbon sinks like the Amazon. The authors argue it is a massive, inexcusable oversight that our daily news tickers completely ignore these existential threats while endlessly obsessing over quarterly retail earnings.
So the crucial point is summarized perfectly by this scientific reality. Scientists track 9 planetary boundaries. These are the fundamental environmental thresholds that keep Earth habitable for human civilization. Well, 7 of those 9 boundaries are now officially breached, including freshwater change and ocean acidification. The reports force us to ask a really uncomfortable question. Why did the crossing of this critical 7th boundary get less airtime on the news than a single day of tech stock earnings? Section 4. Fixing the news cycle. Let's talk solutions.
So how do we actually fix this reporting gap? The authors of our source material argue that modern newsrooms urgently need to step up and adopt some highly actionable blueprints. Now, what's really interesting about this slide is the author's brilliant proposal to track Earth's balance sheet right alongside Wall Street's. Imagine a planetary ticker running right next to the financial one. Instead of just seeing that tech stocks are rallying, you'd simultaneously see global aquifer drawdown rates, showing that major agricultural basins are on track to run dry within 10 to 15 years. Instead of just quarterly consumer spending, we track topsoil loss. It's all about making the physical reality of our planet just as visible as our financial markets.
To do this effectively, the authors argue the media needs to start naming structural actors. First up, they need to call out the linear economy drivers. We're talking about the fast fashion conglomerates and corporations entirely reliant on the throwaway model and single-use convenience. The proposal suggests media outlets must stop protecting their advertising revenue streams and instead accurately report the sheer volume of non-recyclable waste these companies dump into the global economy every 24 hours. The source material also demands that journalists expose what they term sovereign extractor nations. Those are the countries leading the world in per capita waste and extraction. Furthermore, they argue that investigative journalists need to treat sleeping regulatory watchdogs with the exact same intense scrutiny they apply to financial fraud. They need to investigate why international regulatory bodies are allowing synthetic chemicals and plastics to be commercialized long before safety and circularity testing are actually performed. Ultimately, this represents a massive, fundamental shift in how journalism operates. The sources suggest moving away from event-based journalism, which only reports on environmental collapse when a crisis manifests as a localized disaster. Instead, they argue newsrooms must adopt trend-based journalism, tracking the steady depletion of our aquifers, our topsoil, and our carbon budget way before these trends trigger irreversible ecological tipping points. This all culminates in the author's ultimate pitch, directly challenging major networks like CNN, the New York Times, and the BBC. They propose that every major newsroom establish a dedicated planetary health desk. And not just a niche climate blog buried deep in the lifestyle section, right? We're talking about a front-page daily dashboard that tracks resource depletion and pollution thresholds directly alongside international news. The sources emphasize that we need the media to educate, inform, and show us daily how close we are to crisis, so we can actually become better stewards of the planet. Which leaves us with a final, provocative thought from the source material to carry forward. When was the last time you checked Earth's balance sheet? Challenge yourself to rethink your own media consumption and demand that the news holds accountable the trends that actually matter. Thanks for joining this explainer, and keep asking the big questions.